My name is Jared Calvert. At the age of 21, I established the Ranger Airfield Foundation in Ranger, Texas, upon recognizing that the efforts to preserve my hometown's historic airfield was insufficient. Ranger's Airfield dates back to 1911 when R.G. Fowler landed a Wright Brothers built biplane on the open expanse that would later become the official airfield of Ranger. In 1931, Amelia Earhart utilized the airfield, as did other well-known aviators like Pancho Barnes, Richard Bach, and even General Patton overnighted at a hotel in downtown Ranger. Countless individuals would utilize the airfield over the years, but Ranger's population would dwindle, leaving little use for the airfield, much less the funding to improve it or even keep it open. So I created the Ranger Airfield Foundation. For 15 years, RAF and Ranger City Hall maintained an excellent collaborative partnership. Once RAF demonstrated its reliability, the city executed a 30-year lease with RAF for the entire field. 3 years into the lease, the city decided to amend and transfer ownership, permitting private individuals to construct antique-style hangar homes along the airfield perimeter, in accordance with the field's historical context, while maintaining the interior as an open space for aviation activities such as flying Ranger's tail-skidded, brakeless 1918 Curtiss Jenny. The city was the sole party to have legal counsel during this process. The city's attorney signed off on, drafted, and approved every step of the way. The councils voted on their agreements unanimously. With the final contract approved and signed, the first builders broke ground. Unexpectedly, without a council meeting or a published agenda, a commissioner who had previously supported the approval took control and directed the city manager to order a halt to construction. An extortion attempt followed. Quote, "What would it do if we told you to stop and you pay us?" No one on the city council was strong enough to counter this illegal action. I knew if the airfield was going to be saved from this corruption, it would rely on my ability to assemble a competent and ethical team. For 6 months thereafter, the city declined every request to meet. The time had come for us to take the action that we had long been trying to avoid. We sued my hometown for breach of contract. And a surprise to no one, the city claimed government immunity. With this action, I knew that saving not only the airfield but my hometown would come down to the ability to remove these people from office by the force of recall. In Texas, recalls are seldom, and fewer than 50% achieve success. We opted to recall only 2, hoping the remaining 3 would understand the public's desire for educated and fair decisions. With 2 removed, the remaining 3 didn't hear the people. Weeks after that removal, following the rejection of their immunity claims in a courtroom loss, in an attempt to kill the lawsuit, they foolishly opted to terminate the lease in its entirety, which only landed them in a second lawsuit. With the 2 removed and a win for the airfield in court, airfield projects on hold, builders building in other towns, and so much more, I opted to run for my city council. I was elected by 78% of the people, as was another local hometown man, tired of seeing Ranger being mismanaged. After being elected, I recognized conditions in town were far more dire than they appeared. So a second successful recall was held. When the dust settled, all 5 original members were removed from office. With good and reasonable servants stepping up into those positions to clean City Hall and the town overall, Ranger Airfield asked the city to rescind the previous decision to terminate. What you are about to see is the culmination of a multi-year process, a study in the rights and duties of citizenship. With that said, the original case is still at the appeals court, for which the city lost, and we are awaiting that ruling. We appreciate your support, and we thank you for the time you'll spend watching this video.
Agenda item number 9, discuss, consider rescinding, reversing the March 25th, 2024 3-0 council vote terminating the lease with Ranger Airfield Maintenance Foundation. This has been requested by the Ranger Airfield Maintenance Group.
Yeah, so I've stepped away from the table. I'm not a commissioner. I'm going to be abstaining from this vote. And I'm on here on behalf of the Airfield Maintenance Foundation. I apologize for how I sound, and I might sound a little sluggish. I've had a spring cold, and I'll try to make this as clean as I can. We're here because of the Ranger Airfield lease and the city's termination of. Now, before I get started, I want you to notice this is the city's drafted lease that was agreed upon. This was done by the Knight Law Firm. This is the city's long-term lawyer. And the airfield did not have an attorney when this lease was drafted. This was entirely done by the city, and it was approved by the city. We're here because 6 years into the lease, the city decided to terminate it. I want you to notice it was a 3-0 vote. This was after the recall. And they terminated because the foundation has failed to carry the required insurance for the majority of the term and has allowed the required insurance to lapse for more than 10 days. We notified the city that we did not have the insurance when they asked, and we also notified the city in writing that the city told us not to carry the insurance. And they asked no follow-up questions before terminating. They didn't say, why? What do you mean the city told you? Nothing. They just ran with it. I want you to notice it for the majority of the term. They even throw that little nugget in there showing that we had insurance for a little while. Going back from 2018 through 2022, 9 commissioners voted for the lease and the amendment 7 times. John Casey, Brittany Boykin, Robert Butler, Vicki Gertis, Sam McGinnis, Kevin Moyes, Larry Monroe, Joe Pilgrim, and notably Terry Robinson. Think about that. Not one time was there a single dissenting vote until 2024. So before I get into the termination, I want you to notice this motion and approval in 2018. Agenda item 9, Commissioner Casey authorized the mayor to enter negotiations for a long-term lease. Boykin seconded, but more importantly, right above that, Commissioner Casey and Vicki Gertis motion and second, all in favor, for the approval of the 5-person board of the Maintenance Foundation. There was an Airfield Foundation and an Airfield Maintenance Foundation, and the city told us you have to create the Maintenance Foundation, and we, meaning the council, get to pick the 5 people. We as an airfield had to bring it to your board, and you got to say on who the 5 was. Then in 2021, after reconvening in the open session, Commissioner Butler authorized the Airfield Maintenance Foundation to pursue negotiations to amend the lease, and it was seconded by Commissioner Moyes. The airfield came to the city council and said, do you want to keep the lease as it is, or do you want to amend? It was the city's choice. Commissioner Moyes seconded to amend. It could have been left alone. Then you have 2022, September. This is before a lawsuit from the Knight Law Firm. This letter is to inform you that the city of Ranger has determined to effectuate the terms of that certain lease and amendment by and between the city and the airfield. I want you to note that Commissioner Moyes and Sam McGinnis and Terry Robinson were on the council in 2022 when this letter was sent saying the city determined to effectuate the terms of the lease. Now, I'm sure most of you are educated in here. Effectuate means to put into effect. It means we like it. We want it to continue. When you're getting these legal documents, what would you think? We're okay with it. We've decided to put it into effect. So what happened in 2024? It's pretty simple. The city loses in court regarding the breach of contract, and they appeal that January. A few weeks later, 2 commissioners, their 2 top commissioners in their little game down here, they're recalled. I want you to note there, Judge Aaron at the court says on this date, the court considered the city's plea to the jurisdiction, and therefore we find the plea should be denied. Order of that plea is denied in its entirety. The city loses. At that point, the city could have said, you know what, we respect Judge Aaron. We don't have government immunity. Let's try to meet and try to figure out what we can do. But they hadn't met for the previous 6 months before a lawsuit.
Robert Airfield.
Yes, I'm here to formally request at the next council meeting to be on the agenda an airfield update. I've requested items for the last 2 meetings and been denied on all those items over the last few weeks. I think it's providing a disservice to the airfield and the citizens of Ranger to not allow us to come explain what we're doing at the airfield.
Why are they going to meet now? They go back in executive session, they walk out, and they say, we make a motion to do what we decided in the back. Nobody knew in the audience.
Right. I move to allow legal counsel to proceed with directions provided in executive session.
I have a motion. I have a second. All approved? Motion passed.
The city filed their appeal on the 20th day, which was the last day allowed by law to appeal. And that's when the airfield found out the city was going to appeal, and that's when the taxpayers found out they were going to appeal. So, a couple weeks after they file their appeal, and a couple weeks after a couple of their top people are recalled, they cancel and terminate the lease. The first time anybody's voted against the lease. So the 8th time it's come before the board, it had gone from 9 commissioners, unanimous every time, to now the 8th time, 3 of them are against it. Commissioner Siegler made the motion, Irwin seconded, Robinson voted in favor of termination. Again, only citing the insurance, nothing else. So I'm going to take you to the lease for a moment. Article 5 regarding insurance. Before I dive in that, we're not going to go over every line, but I want you to notice I've got A, B, D, F, G, H, and I up there. This is from the Knight Law Firm. There's no C and there's no E. This is indicative of the copy and paste lease that the city got from their attorney. It says different things in different sections. You go to page 7, insurance. The city shall adequately insure the airport as required by law and as further described herein. That's on page 7, saying the city's supposed to carry insurance. This is important. Page 9, the city, leaseor, shall be required and does hereby agree to maintain airport insurance if there's any confusion under the general policy of the city. So you have 3 separate sections where 2 saying the city's supposed to carry it and the airfield's supposed to carry it in another. And the city, right before they terminate, go, we don't know why you didn't carry it. We're not going to ask. I want you to notice G. All policies must be approved by the city to ensure that the provisions of the section are included. And then H, cities shall be provided with copies of such policies. As proof that the city later told us, don't worry about the insurance, in 5.5, 6 years, the city never approved any policies. They never asked for any policies. They never asked anything about it because they knew they told us not to have the insurance. Not until losing in recalls in 2024 did they pull this rabbit out of the hat. So with the city already carrying insurance, the city told the foundation in 2019 not to worry about the insurance. A city manager took the stand in court and acknowledged, we told the foundation not to worry about it. Did you ever request policies? No. Did you ever approve policies? No. We knew this was coming though. It had been leaked to the foundation. So in early 2024, knowing the city was wanting to play games, the foundation went ahead and bought the insurance, double insuring the airfield. We wrote a $5,000 check to insure the airfield that was already insured by the city, knowing that they were going to play games. The city terminated anyway. We provided proof of insurance before the city terminated. So on the 25th, they make that motion, Siegler does, and Wendy Irwin seconds, and Terry votes in favor, 3-0 vote. That was on the 25th. This is from the Knight Law Firm on the 26th. Notice what they say is supposed to happen by March 27th at 10 a.m. The foundation is to vacate the airfield by 10 a.m. the next day. We got this letter at about 1 p.m. when the mail was delivered, meaning it was already typed up before they voted on it on Monday night. There's no way it can go in the mail and be at the mailbox by 1 o'clock in one day. And it says city representatives will schedule the time with designated foundation representatives to walk through the inventory of the foundation's property to be removed from the airfield, meaning buildings and tractors and whatever else the city was going to try to say to take off their property. But think about what this is. The foundation filed a lawsuit against the city. The city claimed government immunity. They lose. They file an appeal. The appeal is still pending to this date. March 27th, the appeal is still pending. But a year ago, with the appeal still pending, they terminate. and say, get off the airport. I don't think they did a very good job of researching what it would mean if they terminate. I don't think you want to fall under the termination clause of the lease. So what happened here when this letter was sent is the foundation had to call their attorneys and get a temporary restraining order. Those are only good for 2 weeks. So we had to pull our valuable attorneys off their current cases in Fort Worth and Dallas, file a lawsuit, file a lawsuit, request a hearing in the district court within the 2-week period. Our attorneys had to travel here. We had to do trial prep in Fort Worth and here. The city's attorney had to come for this. And in that 2-week period, we got our hearing. I was on the stand for over an hour. The city's witness, or the former city employee that was an airfield witness of all this going down, was on the stand for probably 20 minutes. And the judge ordered the restraining order to be extended. So the city of Ranger has a restraining order right now on it. And there was an injunction to not remove the foundation from the property. Keep in mind the foundation's been on the property for over 15 years, mowing it, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars of improvement. I'm a volunteer. I've never been paid a salary, hourly, nothing out there. And they're like, get off in 20 hours. What did they think that we were going to do? Okay, walk? Or did they think we were going to file a second lawsuit? I don't think they thought it through. This is Judge Harrod's ruling. Section 3, the city has attempted to improperly terminate the lease without proper notice, despite the foundation curing any alleged default under the lease. As a proximate cause of the city's conduct, if allowed to cancel and or terminate the agreement without an opportunity to cure and or notice, the foundation will suffer imminent and irreparable damages that cannot be reasonably ascertained at present. Followed by the improper termination would interfere with the current issues concerning title of the airfield, i.e. the first lawsuit. Section 5, by continuing with the termination, plaintiff faces an imminent risk of irreparable harm. If the city is not enjoined, the court finds that the foundation will suffer immediate and irreparable injury resulting from the purported termination of the lease, followed by allowing the defendant to proceed will cause harm that cannot be adequately measured or compensated by monetary damages. So I told you the city didn't do much research. I want you to look at this picture of Commissioner Siegler not long before that vote to terminate. Now you just see a guy looking at papers, but what's really important to me there is that piece of paper with the blue header and the yellow lines. There's a zoom of it on his left. That's one of the anonymous letters sent by the recalled commissioner. That was their homework. That's the research that this commissioner did before motion to terminate. Didn't say, hey, what do you mean you don't have it because of the city? Didn't say, hey, we should probably meet because you keep winning and we're wasting taxpayer money. We as a city just wasted $31,000 fighting a recall that y'all were successful of. I think probably we should ask you questions, but no, they use the anonymous letter that's written by a recalled commissioner that is a defendant in the airfield lawsuit. That's their homework. Had he done more homework, he might have read this in Article 3 of the lease that the city voted for 7 times. If the city desires to terminate the lease for cause or repurposing the land prior to the expiration of the initial term, the foundation shall be compensated for personal property at a fair market value. This was something the city agreed on that was written by the Knight law firm acknowledging if the city were to say, we terminate, say 5 years in, we have to buy the hangar from you. And you go, well, it's city property because it's a fixed. Well, what did the city attorney put in the lease? 701. The foundation may, for its purpose of approved activities, erect a building or buildings. Such building or buildings, even though affixed to the premises, shall be deemed the personal property belonging to the foundation. What did they put in there as well? The foundation shall be compensated for personal property to fair market value as represented by airports located at Granbury, Weatherford, Stephenville, and so on. Meaning, if they're going to kick the foundation out, the city, just pay us what it would take for us to rebuild this somewhere else, because we built this here, investing in this city. And had we known you wanted to terminate and just take our building, we would have gone and built there in the first place. That's why that was put in there. There was a depreciation schedule of 10 and 20 and 30 years, but we're not at 10 years yet. Knight Law Firm again, notice the attorney's fees. In the event of litigation, the victor gets to recoup their attorney's fees. So the last thing I'll note in these cartoons of me being made the king, carrying a staff and a pacifier, saying I have a conflict of interest. Well, the Cabbage Patch Kid complains to the Texas Rangers that I have a conflict of interest because I'm on the city council as a volunteer, which I'm not taking the $10 a meeting, and I'm in the Airfield Foundation, which is suing the city. Well, Texas Ranger Buxton investigated me, and he called and he said, you do not have a conflict of interest. But if they want to play this game that we have a conflict of interest, or I do, I want you to notice who voted for this. Terry Robinson voted to terminate. Here's Judge Harrod's ruling. Instead of pulling it out where we are going to show you foundation documents to prove that Terry Robinson is a defendant in the Airfield lawsuit, I went ahead and pulled out Judge Harrod's signed ruling ordering the injunction and the restraining order. He mentions Terry Robinson by name as a defendant in the Airfield lawsuit. So not only did this defendant in the Airfield lawsuit go back into executive session, she walked out and voted to terminate a lease with a company that's suing her. Does that not sound like a conflict of interest? I threw in some photos of the hangar that would have been restored by now. The money to restore this hangar, hundreds of thousands of dollars that we raised to restore this hangar that's supposed to be restored and be a city asset. It's in the lease that it's supposed to be remain owned by the city. We fundraised 100% privately funded money to restore it, and this money's been sitting in a high interest CDs. Was able to find some 5%ers, and this money just sits while your building looks like this. Lead tip nails coming out of the wood. You're going to notice when this video goes, you can see the pipe totally rusted in two. This has active electricity rolling through it. Your county appraiser, chief appraiser, was growing tired of getting calls about the evaluation of the airfield, so he asked. We didn't ask for him to come out. He came out and said, I need to see this building. And he valued this building at $18,000. 10,800 square feet is historic 1928 hangar. He valued at $18,000. Do you know why I said $18,000? Because that's what its scrap value is. And we couldn't get insurance to insure this building, and we provided that in our documents before they terminated. And they used that, if you go back and look at the city's termination, that we didn't carry the appropriate insurance on their building. We gave them letter after letter from underwriters saying we will not insure your building. This building, would you insure that building?
Yeah.
That's what it would look like today. But you've had a lot of self-interested people serving. So basically, I want to ask you guys what you want to do. You want to rescind that vote that we want to say never happened? And I'm here to answer any questions.
I'd like to make a couple of comments if I could. And I would ask that if I characterize something wrongly, please correct me. I'd appreciate that. As you saw in the presentation, I'm one of the commissioners that voted for the lease. And I can tell you right now, before I make my other comments, I'll vote for it again. And the reason why is this town has history, and that history is important. And I have to tell you, I was extremely frustrated at the thought that we might take a historical airfield that Amelia Earhart landed at, that we had service members preparing to support war efforts, and have that turned into the potential of making $1 million off of, but we would lose it forever. I mean, we have towns like Mineral Wells restoring a single hotel and spending millions of dollars just to maintain their history. We're gonna be talking about the pool tonight. But more than that, we consistently talk about not having the investment in this town. And so the airfield won't say it. Again, if I'm wrong, please correct me. But I was on the EDC at the time, and we had one investor that was not only going to put his hangar out at the airfield, he had purchased 4 buildings in this town off of Main Street to set up businesses. Dr. Watkins' old office, the Garner building, the old lumber yard that behind the bank that became a restaurant, and the building behind Greer's. Those were 4 businesses that were shut down because the lease was revoked. And the hangars, one of the things I personally found frustrating, and this is where you'll have to correct me if I have it wrong, is it was characterized as an HOA agreement. And the discussion was the fact that because this was historically significant, that the hangars that were built out there would be something that would contribute to the heritage and the history of that airfield. And that airfield and that original hangar would always belong to the city, regardless of who built out there. And that HOA agreement was really nothing more to make sure that when people came out there and built, they built in that same vintage style to really highlight the history of our city. So we had 3 investors at the time I left the council, one of which was going to open up a flying school for our youth. All of that was lost. We talked about lost opportunities in Walmart, all these other things. This was a lost opportunity. And it doesn't have to be lost forever. I think we can start, my opinion is I think we can start tonight by reinstating that original lease that should have never been turned over in the first place. And I don't think that they read through it to understand, that's my opinion, I can't prove that, to understand what they would have to pay and what it would cost the city if they did. But more important, we lost vintage style hangars that would further promote our legacy. We had people willing to come invest in our community, volunteer to be on our boards, build businesses. And so hopefully, you know, we will vote tonight to reverse this decision so that we can move forward with one of Ranger's most historic and iconic landmarks. So anyway, those are a couple of notes I wrote up today. As you can tell, I feel pretty passionate about it, but I feel pretty strongly about it as well. So that's my comments to the commission.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I agree 100% with you.
I was here the night that they voted to end the lease based off the insurance. I was excited when this whole project kicked off because I'm a huge history buff and I could see the significance of this entire project, and it would have been a tremendous asset. And then I watch it fall apart before our eyes because of some personal feelings.
Well, what I can't stand, I want to point out publicly, is hours and hours and hours that this guy spent in his basement making YouTube videos. And he's not here signed up for this item to ask questions. And I asked Paige in writing when I got on the council, show me the state statutes or the state law that items under litigation cannot be discussed in open session. And she couldn't provide it because it doesn't exist. It's something that the city has done, not you guys, but the past council to protect themselves from looking like fools. If I were allowed to stand up here and say, ask me a question, Vicki. Ask me a question, Jim. Ask me anything. And I tell you, they're going to be taxable. Scott Purdue's hangar in Kent, Texas is taxed now. The stupid videos with their stupid music, with the stupid not facts, say, oh, they were all going to be nonprofits. And unfortunately, the people that fall in line with that kind of thinking that, oh, we're the bad man just because somebody pointed at us and said we're the bad man, repeat that stuff online, going, oh, there's all going to be nonprofits. Or you know what, if they didn't have insurance and they had had a crash with those kids, the city would have been sued. It's like, no, that's not how it works, because I can sit down here and answer the questions and say, Robert, I'm sorry, that's not how it works. The airfield's insured, protecting the city, and it indemnifies if there's any activity from the public or even the leasee. And we have to have our own insurance of the airplane to teach these kids. Or you could actually ask for maybe proof of it like the lease requires if you're in trouble. But they don't want to have these conversations. And they protected themselves under this notion of, oh, we can't talk about it. We're going to go.
Don't worry about it. I called out the mayor. Excuse me, point of order. He's talking about the lawsuit. You do it all the time online, Joe. You do it all the time online. I will not be denied a voice. You want to tell everybody else what you're telling people?
We're going to go back there in executive session and not have two-sided conversation. It was I just can't, every time a word was said by a commissioner, it was just like printing money into the mouth of the attorneys.
I was present for that conversation that night that we had with Paige when you asked her to quote the statute.
Yeah, couldn't do it.
It was crickets. There was nothing there.
Oh, and then by the way, I asked our attorney, why is the council coming out and saying, we make a motion to do what we decided in the back?
I make a motion that we authorize legal counsel. That's not the. Is it? Go ahead. Make a motion. Sorry, I got confused. We are. I make a motion that we authorize legal counsel to act as directed in the executive section. That's
Yeah. Steve Curtis, 11th Court of Appeals case. That's correct.
yes.
I'll second.
Man, we have some discussion real quick. I thought we were setting a date.
Well, that's she's.
Oh, that's on the next one. I'm so sorry.
That's item 11.
I told you I'm so.
That's item 11.
Yes, we did.
So I have a motion and I have a second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye. My apologies.
Motion passed.
And our attorney said, quote, it's strategy.
You're
and
correct.
nobody held anybody accountable, but you know who did? The people that voted for recalls. So thank you.
Well, I'm really glad that we opted not to go into executive session for this discussion. There'll be some people that disagree with it, but they should understand why we came to the decisions that we did.
I promised transparency when I ran, and this right here is about as transparent as it gets.
Yes.
All they did was shoot themselves in the foot because it's 2025. I would have been living in Austin. They would have had their cabal down here stealing from the taxpayers still. And all I want to do is pet some dogs and fly some old planes, come here on the weekends and save Ranger Airfield. And I wouldn't be standing here, and you guys wouldn't be sitting here, and Ranger would be circling the drain faster than ever. So, it's been quite the journey.
I believe the harm that's been done to Rangers nearly irreversible over there.
Well, we still have a chance now.
Yeah.
We still have people wanting to build, believe it or not. They go, you know what? Let us know when the city stuff's over. So, and when he says we had 3 builders, that was a self-imposed thing. This is where an open conversation is good. It's like, well, we're only getting 3 buildings for the whole property, this and that. No, we're restoring your hangar. Go quote it out to see what it would cost to restore that, to look like that. I guarantee you it's more than their appraisal that they paid to have done. And 2, we limited it to 3 hangars per year to protect the culture of the airfield. We had 7 people wanting to build it once.
So if I could, Charlie, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion.
Well, one last thing
Okay.
is taxpayers aren't going to like this, but we don't feel that's our responsibility or the donors. Think about if you donated this project when we had to sue the city a second time and do the emergency hearing. It was a $42,000 a month. This case right now, and it's not settled. This is an injunction until the first case is settled. So the first case can be settled or ruled in court, but there's still a case over termination. So it's $42,000 that we had to spend. And people may go, well, that's not our fault that they spent $42,000. But I want you to think about the numbers that they spent fighting the recall. The first recall, $31,486, plus the $9,000 that the Eastland County accidentally paid for the recall election. The taxpayers escaped on that one. On the second recall, they spent over $6,000 fighting the recall, and then they spent $9,000 for the election when they all resigned anyway, which is far and above the $42,000 that we had to spend to get a restraining order on you. So I know the financial situation of the city. I think we're extending an extreme olive branch to say, you know what, consider an interest-free loan, $4,200 a year for 10 years. We could swallow $4,200, but that's not on the donors, and we'll continue to fight it in court to have that paid back. So they didn't want to stop the bleeding when the bleeding was little. It's like, what do you guys want to do? It's a tough situation, but what would you do if it was your nonprofit that you dedicated your life to, that your friends donated to? You donated to your favorite cause, and somebody played this game, and you just wash your hands of that? What would each of you do? So that doesn't have to be decided tonight. That's nothing I mentioned to any of you beforehand, because I haven't talked about this with any of you beforehand, because it's not right. And believe it or not, as much vinegar as I have sometimes, I try to do what's right, because I've done enough that's wrong in my past, and I don't want that reputation. So I think you should take it under consideration, think about how you pay for it, or think about if you want to keep fighting it.
I'd also like to bring up the fact of the questions that were asked and answered.
Oh yeah, that was a beautiful thing. They asked 31 questions on a Friday at 12:15 in the morning, knowing we had a meeting on Monday. And I answered, and the foundation answered, the 31 questions in 10 pages. And 2 pages were dedicated alone to what entailed restoration. Well, do you know what Brad Bullock at Messer Fort is using it as an argument? The city doesn't know what restoration is. But they took our 31 answers, including 2 pages on restoration, had line item after line item that entailed restoration, and then they walked out and voted to effectuate the terms of the lease, satisfied with the answers of restoration. You can't make this stuff up.
That was discussed. When was those questions?
August 2022. The lawsuit wasn't until January.
Okay, and then I literally heard people say, after I got on the council, we don't know what that was. We don't know what restoration was. I read the questions. I had the questions. I read the questions, the answers. I knew what restoration was, but how could we say that all that time later that nobody knew what it was? This whole thing has had me baffled. We say that we want Ranger to grow and we want better things, and then all of this gets pulled. It's beyond my comprehension that we would do that.
Personal vendettas, man, they're powerful. It takes a strong person to say, I've been bested, or I'm wrong.
Well, you and I have both been strongly ridiculed throughout this whole process. I'm your puppet. You're the king, I'm the queen, all this stuff that gets said on social media. We know who's doing it. I give it no credence whatsoever. I'm being told that Jared is actually the one pulling all the strings up here. I thank Jared for his support while I was running for office. And I'll be the first one to tell you, Jared can make or break an election in Ranger, Texas. He can. So, it's better to have him as an ally than an enemy, I can tell you that.
No, let's not say that, no.
But he's very passionate about this whole situation. I'm very passionate about the town. And to be ridiculed the way that we're being ridiculed is childish. It's uncalled for. And I am here publicly to say anybody that has a difference of opinion should sign up to run for council. Do your part. Or if you want to sit down and have a discussion with us, where we can ask each other questions and we can work together and we can find compromise, I will sit down at the table with anybody in town that has a difference of opinion. I think we can come up with logical cooperation. I think we can. And I challenge everybody that thinks differently to figure out a way to come sit with us and let's figure out a way to come together. I'm in total support of anything that we can do to make the town better. And I think that the airfield and the different projects that they had lined up would have gotten us in a much better place. And it's a shame that we're here. It's a shame that so many of our tax dollars were wasted. It's a shame that tax dollars were wasted on recalls when the state attorney general has already ruled that you can't use the city's resources to defend you in a recall.
Should be noted that the city, in the last 2.5 years, has spent over $150 grand on attorneys.
Well over what was budgeted each year.
Anyway,
So Robert, if you'd like to make a motion?
Yeah, well, and, you know, just, y'all brought up a couple of things. I'm not sure anybody can ever guess what in the world Robert Butler is gonna say. I will tell you that before I say something, I do a lot of research and a lot of investigation, and so I guess the main thing that I want to do is I would be proud to make the motion that we do not lose one of our historical sites, that Ranger Oil Boom Museum, our Ranger College, this Ranger Antique Airfield are important. I make a motion that we move forward to reinstate this lease, and I guess I'd be looking for a second.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? I usually don't vote, but I'm voting. Unanimous.
thank you guys.